Hello and welcome to an unconventional show that looks at self-sufficiency from a different angle. On our channel, where we focus on the prepper philosophy, we've talked about self-sufficiency in terms of resources, the ability to cook, store food, and take care of our own health, but we tend to overlook self-sufficiency when it comes to seeking out and improving our skills in education and our ability to succeed in today's world. Those of you who have a bit of a creative spirit and would like to have the ability to earn money from home, especially in times when that's not entirely possible, might appreciate short videos about ways to make such an income. I think I should divide today's video into several levels. First of all, we're going to talk about what you see here as a way to make money. What you see here is a plotter, which many of you probably know, and for those who don't, it's called Cricut. It's basically an entry-level device into the world of modern production, even from home, with the possibility of selling online or to people around you in your community. If you want to cross that magical threshold between how things used to be made and how they're made today, let's talk about it a little bit. I've been creating and making things basically since I was a little kid. As I grew up, my expectations for my own creations grew with me, and I tried out a lot of different skills that you, as a creator or artist, might want to try too. I've painted with oils. I can sew, embroider, do bob and lace, crochet, and knit. Many of you already know that. So, handcrafts and creating things in this way. But I also got into wood carving and even making stained glass and mosaic stained glass in the Tiffany style. From my field, I learned a lot of things, and not just during the time I attended a jewelry making vocational program for a while. Later, as an adult, I became interested in all these fields on my own, so I know the basics of goldsmithing, jewelry making, glassworking, which includes lamp working, so-called fusion glass, which is melting glass components together so they fuse into a single object. And since I'm from a glass-making region, of course I'm also familiar with furnace glass and glass making in general. I haven't tried glass blowing myself, but I do know how to grind glass and, overall, I know how to work with glass. On my journey in the arts and, for example, the possibility of making a living, I also completed a full welding course, so I have several licenses for arc welding and other types as well. Every time I look back at the things I've made, that original journey toward art and creating some beautiful object, maybe something practical or for sale, was all about the hands, the material, the joining of those materials, or the combination of skills you learn in those crafts. But then there came a time when I had to, so to speak, virtually cross the threshold from that world, how things used to be made, and learn to work with materials a little differently. First, through the world of computer programs and virtual platforms. I think my very first step toward getting acquainted with this was Adobe Photoshop and editing photos, but I soon realized there was so much more you could do there. The next program was Corel Draw, and a long time ago I even got to know AutoCAD. Since these programs, at the time I encountered them, weren't essential for me and I didn't need them for everyday use, I put them aside for a while and went back to my original way of creating. Hands, materials, my imagination, and making something new out of it. Then this device came into my life, and it was a personal revolution for me because it made me go back to Photoshop and really think about which files I would be working with. And the initial work on the product I wanted to make didn't happen at a table, in a workshop, or anywhere with materials in my hands, but virtually on the computer desktop, where I had to learn to create something in a two-dimensional world that I would later use in reality and turn into a physical product. Why am I explaining it in such a complicated way? Notice that today we live in an over-technologized era. You have tons of options, from the phones you all have in your pockets to computer programs and various apps. Everyone assumes that anyone approaching something like this already knows a whole bunch of other things. And a lot of beginners. That kind of approach is discouraging. So, for those of you who already know a lot about this world and don't want to keep watching because it would bore you, you don't have to watch. But for those of you who have gotten this far, that you know how to print an email, create a letter in Word, or print photos from a vacation or a party, maybe you'd like to take it a step further and become more self-sufficient, learn new things, and maybe one day earn a living from home if you ever need to. And this brings us to the point where I was 2 when I first had to learn to think in the world of computers so that I could see the final product through all those different files. And by a final product, when it comes to this plotter, I mean something like this wall decoration or an upgrade to the tiles in the bathroom. You can see the difference, for example, between this painting, which I created on canvas. It has a bas-relief surface, which was made with polyfilla. There's a bas-relief copper sheet attached to it, which I hand embossed, meaning I gave it its shape. It's an oil painting combined with acrylic, and I came up with my own patina technique. On the other hand, here you have a painting that's already interactive. It's a stained glass window that's set into the painting. It's complemented by a hand-embossed copper decoration, painted over, and it has LED lights behind it so that the stained glass, even when it's on the wall, shines beautifully through. Today, I create slightly different things, as you can see with this decoration on the wall, for example. It's about flat materials, about combining those materials, about mixing different textures. Sparkly vinyl and a matte wallpaper that's meant to resemble slate, for example. Or this kind of sparkly vinyl on a gilded wall. Again, it's a combination of different materials and also a mix of various techniques. However, here I'm not limited by what I can create with my own hands in terms of shapes, but I can make any detailed shape thanks to the software of this plotter. I'd like to give you an idea of how to work with a machine like this and what the difference is between these two approaches to creation in art. Today's world offers you huge possibilities, and when you manage to cross that threshold and step into the world of digital creation, not everything necessarily has to look like it was made by a machine. You can add your own personal creativity, taste, and imagination, and the final product can look fantastic. This machine doesn't just cut cardstock. It can cut self-adhesive papers that you can print on in various ways. It can cut fabric, leather, thin wooden veneer, and more than 100 different materials, from regular printer paper to the thickest, toughest cardstock, like those weighing 300 grams or even with glitter sequins on one side. This machine comes with several tools and blades, which can include a pen that just makes a crease on the cutout shape where you want to fold it. Those of you who loved ABC and cut out paper models know how you used to make a crease on the fold so you could get a precise and straight fold on the paper. This little machine can, when you place a sheet of cardstock or some material with a metallic foil for gilding, precisely gild the relief you want. It presses it into the paper and leaves a golden or metallic surface there. With this machine, you can cut various vinyls and assemble beautiful iron-on designs for t-shirts like these. There really is an endless variety of different materials here. My favorites are, yes, iron-on vinyls. Then there are various permanent or removable vinyls for sticking onto objects. The possibilities you have with a machine like this are limited only by your imagination and the field you want to pursue. Do you want to make board games? Start by buying a plotter and making the components right on that plotter. Do you want to make greeting cards, various decorative announcement boards for businesses, for restaurants? The only limitation is you. These days, you can get an endless variety of different materials. Personally, I do buy some things from the Cricut store, but honestly, it's usually expensive and they don't have that much of a selection. So, a lot of the vinyls for ironing onto t-shirts, which are called HTV, heat transfer vinyl, I buy, for example, on Temu. Today, there are tons of different cardstock and materials you can use to make greeting cards, various decorations, and all sorts of paper items. Again, this brings us back to my point of view. I like Cricut, and I'd like to use it as a kind of cover or finishing touch for other products I make or want to make on other machines in the future. That means Cricut gives me the option of a two-dimensional surface that matches my vision in every way. In the future, there might be other devices that will help me create a three-dimensional object, which I can then dress up thanks to this plotter. And since we've already talked a lot and you still haven't seen the heart of this device, which is the software, before we get to that, I'll briefly describe the machine for you. This device has a head here like this, which has two holders. They are labeled A and B. Here, as the first tool, I have a classic blade, which cuts vinyl, paper, cardstock, and various similar materials. You can have several different types of these blades for it. You can also have so-called scoring wheels for it. These are little wheels that make those straight folds for you on boxes, for example from cardboard or paper, and so on. I'll talk about this another time and in more detail, what materials, what tools this machine offers. That's mostly in this holder here. And then here we have another holder, which has this kind of adapter that can't be removed. You can put pens and various markers into this holder, the ones Cricut supplies, but with an adapter you can also use other brands. And this device can do what's called hand drawing. That means it basically simulates hand drawing of the exact design you chose, the one you selected to be drawn by hand. The device will draw it for you. This, for example, is an original pen from Cricut. You insert it inside like this, close it up, and now the Cricut can use the black marker to draw on any surface that will accept it on the other side. This is what's called a scoring pen. It's basically just a pencil with a metal tip at the end, sharp but rounded. You can insert it like this, and it will make the lines you programmed in the software, for example on cardstock, so you can fold it straight. The program can use all of this in a single art project, for example. That means, for instance, you have a Christmas card, and that Christmas card is cut out. You have something handwritten on it, and it's folded in half. Later, we'll show you in the program what you're working with. You can make a card like this by creating a rectangle and measuring the center where you want to have a scoring line. That means this pen will make a crease for you. The blade in the other holder will cut out the rectangle for you, and then the machine will prompt you to switch the tools in the holder, so you'll swap the scoring pen for a regular pen, or maybe a glitter pen, or any other kind you like. You start it again, and on the card that's been cut out and has a crease in the middle, it will even write a greeting, a name, or any message you want by hand. And then the machine spits out a beautiful finished piece for you. It's a card that you just lift up, fold, and it's done. There are really a lot of possibilities, and now we're going to take a look at the computer screen and see how you work with a plotter program like this. Before we get started with the computer and the plotter, I almost forgot one very important thing. But that happens even to the experienced ones. If you want to work on the Cricut, you have two options for loading material into this device. One of the options is these kinds of mats. They have a protective film and are sticky. And on these mats, you can stick material right onto the grid. You can smooth it out nicely with a roller. And then the material, along with the mat, goes into the machine, and the machine works with the mat and cuts the material that's on it. The mats typically come in these convenient square shapes, or we also have mats that are available in a much larger format. These are useful, for example, for vinyls that aren't so-called smart materials and that you have to stick onto the mats in order to cut out what you need. What you do with it afterwards, we'll talk about another time, but it's important to know that for regular vinyls, you definitely need to have the mat. For smart materials, you don't need it because those smart materials have a thicker backing sheet that the vinyl is attached to. The machine can handle both the vinyl and the thick backing, and it cuts right on that backing material. The machine cuts on the backing of the material on the back side. That means you don't need a mat, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just vinyl that you stick somewhere. Cricut also makes smart materials like cardstock, which already has an adhesive surface on one side and is attached to a stiff backing, and it's already in a format that really looks like a square mat like this. Then you insert the material without a mat inside, and Cricut knows how to handle it. How does the machine recognize whether you've inserted something on a mat or if it's a smart material? We'll show you that now as we move into the world of the computer desktop. But before we get to the desktop, you of course need to connect the machine to your computer. You have two options. You can either do it via Wi-Fi or with a cable. I recommend using a cable if you have the option and your computer and machine are close enough for the cable to reach. Use the cable because if you're doing some complicated cutting and something happens, like your Wi-Fi or internet drops, the process will be interrupted and you can't go back. You'll have to start over. Whereas with a cable, as long as you make sure your laptop is charged, like in my case, nothing can really go wrong unless there's a power outage. And you can plan for that ahead of time and, like us, work with an alternative power source and run on battery. That means everything I'm doing here today, everything you see, including the lighting, is running on batteries. It's important to figure out in advance how you want to work, but I recommend that you use a cable to connect your plotter to your computer. It's another way to eliminate errors that could ruin your beautiful work. And now let's get started with the workspace. Here you can see the computer desktop. We're going to open the Cricut computer program. You'll need to create a profile in it. You have two options with this program. You can pay for Cricut Access. That's right here. Then you get all these components and things made by other people for free. Fonts, shapes, images. That's what I do because I use it for my daily work, but I understand that some people might not want to invest in it. However, if you use images from within the Cricut environment, Cricut might ask you to pay the creators before you can complete your project. We'll explain that later. But this is an important preliminary step for how you'll be creating. Here we're on the home page, which means the main page, and here we can choose whether we want to work with things we've already made and saved, or if we want to start a new project. That's this canvas button here. So here you have two options: home or canvas. We'll start with a clean slate, that is, here on canvas. What do you see here? You have options here on the top bar. Again, choose things you have already created, or choose which machine you want to use. Here you can see that I have the Cricut Maker 3, but there's also the Maker 4, Maker Joy. That's that little machine. There's also the Cricut Explore 4 and 3, Family, and then there's the Cricut Venture. If you have more than one of these devices, you always have to select in advance, before you start creating, which of these devices you want to work with. Let me give you an example. This is the Cricut Maker. Here you have the largest workspace you can use. 12 by 12 inches. That's about 30.5 by 30.5 centimeters. But if you also had the Cricut Venture, this machine down here, you could work on a much larger area, and that would also determine how large a file you can use and how much you can scale it up. If you wanted to make something big and you had this little machine with a small interface selected, the program would warn you that you've exceeded the capabilities of the device you have chosen. We'll explain that later, but of course, you can find it in the top menu bar. So at this point, we've selected this machine that we're going to work with. We have a new project, and let's take a look at the vertical toolbar to see what tools you have here. This is a new project, which means if you want to open another new project, you can. Here are the templates. If you're designing on those pre-made shapes you see here, you might, for example, choose a t-shirt. And here you even have size options. Let's pick, for example, adult medium, and it will transfer right onto your workspace like this. And you know that when you create an image and want to put it on the t-shirt, you already have an idea that 5.8 by 5.8 centimeters would just be a tiny dot on that shirt. Yes, so here are templates for t-shirts, kids' clothing, and bags. As you can see, the icons are pretty straightforward for cards, for example, which is what we'll be dealing with. Here you can create your design starting from a template, from some pre-made thing, to see what the design will look like and get an idea of how big it will be on the final product. For now, let's just delete this and move on. Here is a card. You can choose whether you want it to be square, or if you want this size, this one, or that one. Here you can already choose a card. Honestly, since I don't make these things yet, I don't use these templates. I haven't done it from the beginning either, but I wanted to show you what options you have in this program. What do we have here next? Projects. These are finished projects from people who made them, and when they save them publicly. That means that on the Cricut platform, you can choose them and either pay for them individually to make them, so the creator gets paid, or you can pay a monthly subscription and have access to all these projects for free. Basically, what do we have here next? Here we have shape options. We'll start with those, but I'll also show you other things that are available. Here you can insert a two-dimensional object onto the canvas. For example, a hexagon like this. You can work with it. You can change its size. Proportionally, which means it keeps the same shape, but only its size changes. Or, in case you already have an object on the canvas, this toolbar at the top will change and you'll have more tools available. Here you can see the dimensions of the object you've placed on the canvas. If you have this little lock icon locked, you can only make the object bigger or smaller without changing its proportions. If you unlock it, then you can. This is the width. This is the height. Now you can change the proportions of the object, so you can work with it however you want. That means this spot here is really important, especially if you're working with an image, which we'll show later, and you don't notice that this lock is unlocked. You could accidentally distort the image. Of course, you can fix that using the undo arrow here. That will fix everything you messed up. It's used very often. As you can see, when I click on the area next to it, this object isn't active. If I click on the object, this kind of grid appears. Depending on how you move your mouse around, you can rotate the object. Here you can even see the degrees by which you've rotated it, and you can stretch or change it in different ways because it's unlocked. If you lock it, you can only use the corners to make it bigger or smaller. What else can you do with such an object? Here, the first thing you need to do is choose what you want the object to be in the end. You want to cut out a hexagon like this from the cardstock. Here you select that it's a basic cut. That means you've given the machine the command that this shape is a basic cut, which means a standard cut. It will just cut this object out of the cardstock that you stick onto the mat. Or it can be wavy. That means it will cut it out in a wavy pattern. Or it can be perforated. That means the machine will cut tiny little lines into the cardstock, and then you can, for example, tear this object out of the cardstock. Let me give you an example. Do you have another simple shape like this? Let's put it here. We'll change its color to, say, shadow. We'll change its size. And let's say it's a sheet of paper on which you have. Okay, let me give you an example. On which you have these little tabs. And you draw a perforated line here, and now you have a flyer with phone numbers at the bottom, so people can tear off a piece with the phone number and take it with them while the flyer stays in place. That's an example. That's a perforated cut. Let's erase this and continue with this object here. That's perforation. Those are the three basic types of cuts. Then you have drawing. So you've chosen this shape and you want your machine to draw it with a marker on the cardstock. So that's pen, foil, fine medium board. Foil means, for example, you have a greeting card and you want a gold decoration in the shape of this hexagon on it. So if you select foil here, the machine can actually draw this shape for you, and it can be a thin line, medium, or thick. Here we have score. A scoring line is exactly what I told you about, what the pen with the metal tip does. And again, let me give you an example. Here we have another object like this. We'll make it about the same size. There. And now we're creating something. You have several hexagons like this around. And you want to make, for example, a little box out of it, which will bend at these points and be cut here. You can do that by choosing to have so-called scoring lines here. The machine won't cut there, but where you have this scoring line, it will just go over it with the metal pen, that metal-tipped pen. And then you'll be able to make that bend here nice and straight. So let's fry it again. And that's the scoring line. Debose. Debose means that the machine will press this shape into the surface. Again, either with that rotating wheel or with that metal pencil. And then engrave them. And that is relief carving. Here we have another option, and that's print, then cut. That means with an item like this, it's not so obvious, but if you choose print, then cut, which means first print and then cut, then the machine and your computer will work together with the printer. And we'll show that on a better example. We'll set this one aside and just use basic cut. Here, under these shapes that we showed you, where you have all sorts of different shapes you can work with, you have images. Let's pick, for example, this little hedgehog. We'll put it on the canvas. With this image, when we select it, it immediately offers us the print then cut option. Why? Because this is a JPG or PNG file. It's an image that your printer can print on a sheet of paper with those little markers in the corners. Then you place it on the mat and put it into the plotter, into the Cricut. It reads those markers on the sides, cuts out the outline of this image for you, and then you can, for example, place that image onto a cutout shape of paper. This is what's called an SVG file. The difference between these two files is that you can think of this one as a sheet, a piece of paper, vinyl, anything, any flat material on which you can put, for example, a sticker like this, or it's printed vinyl. Anything on which you want to have an already created image. So that's the difference. This is an image. It's either a PNG or a JPG, and this is usually an SVG. It's a file that's meant to be cut out. If you want to change the nature of such a file, and you want, for example, this shape to be on, let's say, a yellow sheet. And now, do you like an image like this? Would you like it to look like this? It's possible to merge those two objects. And that brings us down here to this toolbar where we have more tools. If you have a JPG, PNG, or another object that's a basic cut, meaning an SVG, you can either merge them like this. That means when you work with them, you use them like this. Or if we go back, you can choose flatten. So you make it into one, a single layer. Right now, these are two layers. It's a hexagon, which is a basic cut, and then it's an image, which is print and cut. When I merge it by making it into an image, you get a single image, which becomes a JPG or PNG depending on how you imported it, and the program will process it so that when you click Make, you see image is too large. Here it's warning us that we've exceeded the capabilities of the machine we set up, so we have to make it smaller. The exclamation mark is gone. Let's enlarge the workspace. So when you take an image like this, which you flattened and turned into a single image, and you click Make, don't save the project, then it will appear virtually on the platform. You can see here a sheet of paper with boundaries showing where the image can reach. You can rotate it. You can move it to another area if you have more images, but the printer will print little black L shapes in the corners here, which the machine basically uses to guide itself. It scans them and knows exactly that it has to cut along this line here, and then it spits out the mat with the cutout. So, for example, this paper here is a self-adhesive label, and you end up with a sticker of a little hedgehog like this on a yellow background. Let's put it back. Again, we'll outline the object and detach it. If you click anywhere on the workspace, you can separate those two images, those two objects again. And again, here we have a paper piece and an image. What else can you do with it? Of course, there are other tools down here as well. Here, below the images and shapes, you can select text. If you click on it, you can choose from Cricut's fonts here. Just a heads up, this one, Cricut Sans, is free, but if you see a font like this with the little icon and you don't have a subscription, you'll see the prices here. And if you choose to utilize that particular font within the confines of this specific project, when you proceed to click the designated Make button in order to initiate the creation process, it will then prompt you to provide payment for the usage of that very font, as it is a premium asset. So just so you know, not everything there is free. However, if you genuinely do not wish to utilize this particular text, you have the convenient option to effortlessly switch to the system setting located right up here. By doing so, Cricut will then seamlessly access and effectively employ all of the various fonts that you have meticulously installed and made available on your personal computer system. That means fonts you might use in Word or other programs are automatically available to you, and you don't have to use Cricut's fonts at all. What are the pitfalls of this? If you're making something just for yourself, then these fonts are fine. You can use any of them, and the program won't ask you to pay for anything before you create it, because those are your own fonts. You don't have to pay anyone for creating something. If you later wanted to use that product commercially, that is, if you wanted to sell it, and someone noticed that you were using one of these fonts without a license, meaning you didn't pay for the font, you just downloaded it somewhere and installed it on your computer without having the rights to use it commercially, you could end up losing quite a bit of money because someone could take you to court. Nowadays, with artificial intelligence, it's no problem for these programs to scan various platforms where printed items are sold or things made with Cricut or on other platforms. They can recognize from the image which font you used, and they'll simply send you an email. In that email, they'll write that you used such and such font on your product. Provide us with the license you have to prove that you are authorized to use this font. These are things you need to think about in advance. That means you can use system fonts, the ones that are on your computer, but if you want to sell the product later, you need to have a license for every font you use. That's the way the world works. On the other hand, if you choose a font here, it will ask you to pay €4.50 as a one-time fee for using that font. By doing that, you're already paying for the right to use it commercially, because at that moment you've already paid for the license. Within this program and platform, you can prove it. That's a big difference in how you'll use the product after you make it and what you can use here. Here you have recent. There, you'll see the fonts you've recently used. Those are things you'll know you almost never need to go there. But these two icons, if you want to write any text on your product or whatever you're making, these are the ones you'll use. This is your computer and the fonts you have installed on it. This is Cricut. If you subscribe to Cricut Space, you get everything for free, and if you use it, you can continue to commercially use everything you've made. If you don't subscribe to Cricut Space, you'll be required to pay for using this option, like a particular font or image. It all depends on what you've added to your workspace. After that, no one will ever ask you for anything else here. If you use the most beautiful font but don't have the proper license that you've paid for to use it, you could run into trouble in the future. So that's the long and short of it when it comes to fonts. Anyway, we've chosen a font here. Now we'll type in some text. Just a moment. So here we've typed out some text, and now we can work with it. We can decide that we want it to be red. And here we can choose whether we want it to be cut out or to be print then cut as well. It's very important that you can work with the text too. That means if I carefully select the basic cut option here and then meticulously place the precisely cut text, just like this, onto the designated piece of paper that I currently have laid out right here in front of me, ready for the next step in the process. Then when I click Make, I'll have the text, which will be cut out from something. Then I'll have the image and the hexagon. You can work with these three things, which are different. I would like the little hedgehog to also be on the cardstock. And above it, I want the word love to be cut out. So what should we do with it now? So we'll set the text aside and combine these two objects into one. Here we have a sheet of paper with a yellow rectangle and a square printed on it. What next? I like the word love. I want to insert it here. And now we get to the next tool. If your object gets hidden behind the other one like this, you can select it here, and up here you can bring it to the front, send it to the back, or bring it forward again. So now we have a sheet of paper with a printed image. The paper is yellow, and on it we have love. What should we do to make the text cut out as a whole? Well, it's simple. We would have to merge it into one object, but since we've already added the image, it won't work for us. That means we have to click on this object again, separate it, move the image aside, and work with this text and the piece of cardstock. Let's do an example. Now we've selected everything, and here we have the option to cut it out. And what exactly happened then? The significant word love was completely cut out of the paper. Here we have the remaining portion of the paper, and here we have a precisely cut quarter with the word love intricately cut out on it, and upon which we can securely attach the charming hedgehog in this particular way, thereby allowing us to create a delightful picture out of it, for example, a beautiful artistic composition. Flatten. This means that we have a quarter with this printed on it, and then Cricut cuts these words into it. What should I do if I don't want the inscription to be carved, but just printed? Well, that's simple. We can go backwards like this. Here we have a sheet of paper, here we have some text, and we can just place it on the sheet of paper, even together with the little hedgehog, make it into one file, flatten. And now you have a JPG or PNG. It's an image that the printer will print for you just like this, with the inscription, the little hedgehog, and the background. And because it says printing cut here, the plotter will cut it out for you, for example, as a sticker. What should you do if you want this to be a sticker, but you don't want it to have this kind of border. We want it to have what's called an offset, and we can choose whether that offset will be wide or narrow, whether it will have rounded edges or sharp edges. And once we've decided that it will be this wide and have rounded edges, we click Apply, and the offset appears here, which we can change to, say, red so it matches. But it's still not a sticker yet, because if you click off to the side, you can still work with both of these things separately. And again, you have two objects here in the layers. We need it to be a single layer, so it becomes a sticker, but somehow it's not working out for us. So how do we make it precise here? Well, we'll just select it like this. And here we have another tool, and that's Align. And here we can align it horizontally, vertically, to the side, to the edge, to the top, or centrally. I use this very often because now you can be absolutely sure it's centered, and when you select it like this and hit Flatten again, simsalabim, you have a sticker you made yourself. And by combining the object, image, and text, you've created an offset for it. Here in the beta version, there's a way to create a sticker, but we'll look at that another time. So that's this tool. If we insert text here, we have another tool that lets us change the shape of the text, bend it in different ways. Then we have this particular feature here, which provides us with the capability to, when we significantly enlarge the text, essentially bend and manipulate the text in a highly precise manner, conforming it perfectly according to the intricate and specific shapes we have meticulously created and defined within this design space. With it, we can work all the way around like this, bending it in different ways. That means, for example, you create a round image and you want to have text around it. You do that here, or the other way around, too. Yeah, here you can work with the text. Here you have ungrouped letters. That means when you click this, you can work with each individual letter like this. Here you have space. When you have a whole block of text, you can choose the spacing between the lines. Here you can choose the spacing between the letters, also known as tracking. Here is the font size. Here is the font style. Usually, it only offers regular, and here you have the font type. So, this is all related to text. Up here on the toolbar, you have ways to edit what you have. That means if I select this here, I can copy it, I can duplicate it, make more of these objects. When you're making more of these stickers, you need more of them. And we'll show that now. I'll just delete this text here, erase it, and let's say, for example, that we want these kinds of stickers. We want to print them and cut them out. The sticker measures 18.77 by 16.58. I'd like them to be smaller so I can fit more of them on an A4 sheet of paper, so I'll just frame it like this and center it here. So now we have two stickers in a row, and now we can work with them. We can shrink both of them identically like this. Let me give you an example. 7 centimeters. Now let's click off to the side again. Now we have two 7-centimeter stickers. Do we want more of them? Then we can duplicate them. This is a right click on the mouse, duplicate, and now we have 4. Now we can duplicate those 4, so we have 8. And this way, you can create a larger number of those stickers. Here, the number of layers has increased, and now if we click Make, it will process it for us, and you can see this is a sheet of paper, let's say adhesive for printing labels, and you want to create these stickers on it. And now it lines them up here in a really awkward way. We can work with this, and because we don't want to waste material, we can go over to the second page, either move the objects one by one or transfer them as a group. Here, we no longer have the option, or we do have the option to add more. Or we can just move it over here. Here, we can line it up properly. Or maybe we'd want to create it. You have to make sure that none of the pieces are overlapping anywhere, that they have enough space. And if you're satisfied, here you already have it selected as on the mat, because since it's print then cut, you can see it written here. It automatically chooses that you'll have it on the mat. Right? So here, there's nothing to choose, but here you can select whether it's a 4 letter, tabloid, or a 3. Here you can choose how big the material will be that you'll print on with the printer and then cut afterwards. So we've chosen A4. This function will flip it mirror-wise for you. That's in case you're, for example, making it as sublimation paper. So then you have to flip it mirror-wise like this, because when you lay the printed side down on the fabric, it will transfer onto it through sublimation and the text will come out correctly. In our case, we're not doing that, so we've chosen not to mirror it and that it will be on A4. We have it lined up on one mat, on one sheet of paper. Here, we press Continue. Another workspace opens up for us. Now it's loading the machine we've selected, which is the Cricut Maker 3. We wait and wait because it takes a long time. It's not turned on, so we'll turn on the machine, and the machine turned on nicely. I'll show you one more time. So, we'll switch the camera like this. What happened up until now, you've seen. Here, you have to turn on the machine, and as you can see, it moves over here nicely and gets ready. And here, you prepare the surface, the cardstock, or the material you want to print on, and you place it perfectly onto the sticky surface, onto the mat. You press it down like this. And now we have everything ready. Make sure it's sticking on there. The machine is turned on. Here, we load the machine again. We select Cricut Maker 3. Here, we have the option to send what we've created to the printer. And now I've reached the point where I forgot what I'm doing myself. Please, you only attach the material to the mat after you've printed it. You see, there's a big difference between just doing something and doing it while filming. Of course, so the material we've attached to the mat, we actually can't attach it yet because there's nothing printed on it yet, right? Right? So, we'll put it into the printer and print the file. So, we've corrected ourselves. We've inserted the medium, meaning the paper we're going to print on, into the printer, and now we have the option here to send it to the printer. This is very important. Here, it shows you what will be printed on the paper, how it will look, and up here, where those markers I mentioned are, you have a little arrow pointing up. That arrow is very important because it has to be in the top left corner of the mat, since that's the only way the plotter will know what it's cutting out on the paper. That's how it orients itself. So this is a very important thing. Sensor marks ADD. So let's click Next. This is how the page will look. Here we have the printer we've selected. We're only making one copy. Add bleed. What does that mean? Here, as you can see, the border around the stickers, it prints a little bit more of that color. And when the plotter cuts, it will cut right in the middle of that line, that border, so you won't have any white edges anywhere in case it doesn't line up perfectly. So it prints slightly thicker borders and then cuts right in the middle of that border, which is really useful because you always get a perfect edge in the color you wanted. I leave this here set to automatic. This line here is very important. You should select Use System Dialog because that way you're using the settings of the printer you're actually using. Let's click Print. Now, the dialog window for the printer we selected should pop up. Here, we go to Preferences and can continue working with it. Here you can see that duplex is enabled, but we don't want to print double-sided. We want it to be printed in high quality. Here, I personally have to select that I want the rear feeder because the printer we have has several trays. I put these thick cardstocks in the rear one so it feeds better. This is something I have to select here. It's important that you always do it this way. We'll confirm it and hit Print. Now we wait for the printer to print something that will look exactly like this. Here they're reminding us that a properly printed object or file for print and cut should have borders like this, and it's important that the markers are solid so the machine can read what it's doing. Our printer is still printing, so we'll wait a little bit. Here it says that all 4 corners had to be marked. Just a moment. We'll press Done and step away from the computer for a little while. Here on this sheet, you have the file printed out. And here in this top corner, you can see a little arrow. That little arrow has to go right here in this top corner because that's the starting point from where the Cricut operates. It should line up. It should be straight there. We'll press it down firmly onto the sticky mat like this. And with that, it's ready to be cut. Yes, let's make sure it doesn't move and that it's not peeling off. And now we'll go back to the setup. Here we have the computer screen. And what do we see here? Here's the file, which we already have on the mat exactly as you see it in this picture. It zooms in for you nicely like this. Mirror is off. You have all the settings here. Now we'll choose the material that the plotter will cut on the mat. As you can see, the plotter knows what to do, but you have to guide it. You have to guide it in terms of which file you're working with and what you want the final product to be. You told it that by creating an image that's flat. You just want to print it and cut out tokens or stickers from it. Now here we see that we have heavy cardstock, 100 pounds. That might cut through this cardstock, but because I want to be sure, when I'm working with this 300-gram cardstock, I always choose glitter cardstock. And that's because it does what's called 2 passes. That means it cuts the shape twice in a row, so I don't end up with a cut that doesn't go all the way through and I can't get the piece out afterwards. But if you weren't working with cardstock, here you have matte vinyl, and here you have printable waterproof stickers. These are stickers that have an extra film on top, so you can even put them in the dishwasher, and there's also everyday iron-on. If you were making a t-shirt and this was vinyl, then you have printed vinyl like this, so you can choose vinyl. This is the moment when you choose which material the machine will cut. If you don't see the material here in the options, you can browse Cricut's incredible selection where you have endless possibilities for using iron-on. This includes leather, paper, plastic, vinyl, and all sorts of other materials. You've got foam here, foil material, an endless variety of fabrics. Cardstock refers to various types of thicker paper, and artboard is really more like a heavy cardstock, or you could say a thinner chipboard. So here you can choose. If you don't have something you want to use right now in your favorite group of materials, you'll definitely find it here. There's pretty much everything there, even samples from the moon. Here we have glitter cardstock, so we'll select that because it will cut it twice for us. Here you can choose whether you want it to cut in the usual way or with less pressure. For example, with stickers, we don't want it to cut through the wax paper the sticker is on, we just want it to cut the sticker itself, so we select less pressure. In this case, we'll choose more pressure because we want to be sure it really cuts all the way through this 300-gram cardstock. And here we have tools, and here we have clamp A and clamp B. You can see that there's nothing in tool holder A. If you had an item where you wanted to do scoring or write with a pen, you would see a prompt here telling you to insert the pen or the pen with the metal tip. But we're not doing anything like that, so here we just have the blade. In this case, it's the fine point blade. That's the standard one. Here it says to insert the mat until it touches these rollers, these wheels, the feeder. Those are the instructions. And then we need to press the load button. That's the button that pulls the material in for us, and now we'll show it on camera. The instructions told us to take the mat, insert it until it touches these wheels here, and the mat isn't sticking very well anymore. If it happens that your mat isn't sticking well anymore and you're not sure if you put it into the machine, the blade might start moving the whole mat instead of cutting it. There's a simple trick for that. This is just regular masking tape, the kind you use when painting so you don't get paint on the outlets. We all know it, and I always cut it into strips like this, and then just here on the edges, where it doesn't really matter, I stick those strips on like this. And it works like magic, because then the corners don't lift up on you. And the machine doesn't mind at all that it's there. These stickers, but of course the mat itself also has its own lifespan. After several uses, it just doesn't stick as well anymore. Otherwise, the corners would lift up unnecessarily, something might tear, or it wouldn't cut out the way it's supposed to. This is a way to prevent that and use the mat all the way to the very end of its lifespan. So we've shown how to deal with the situation that came up. Now we'll insert the mat just as the computer, the program, instructed us until it touches these rollers here, and we'll press the load button, and now the magic happens. The magic is happening. Since my top camera isn't working at the moment, I tilted it like this so you can see. And it's already working. Now we'll switch back so you can see what's on the screen. And here you can see that it's prompting us to press go. And here, the little arrow is blinking, so we'll press it. And what's going to happen now? First, it measures the area to make sure you have the right size material. And now the sensor is reading the printed markers on the sides. Hand it here. And based on that, it determines exactly where on the printed surface the objects to be cut out are located. It's an unbelievable miracle. When you see it for the first time, you can't believe your eyes. Now it moves to the side, rotates the blade to clean it in a kind of docking station. It does a test cut, and now it's cutting. And because it cuts each shape twice to make sure it goes all the way through, you'll see for yourself that in just a moment we'll have beautiful stickers or tokens, depending on what you want to use them for. And it doesn't even take that long. Personally, I find it very soothing and nice to watch my little buddy here working for me so precisely. Exactly. Maybe before it finishes cutting, I should mention that it's a good idea to go through the Cricut Space program every now and then and calibrate the machine. When you buy the Cricut, right at the beginning it clearly guides you through the whole calibration process, and it's nothing complicated. And we're done. When the finished product slides out like this, you can tap somewhere on the edge to see if it cut all the way through. If that doesn't happen, you can just press the loading button here again, and since you haven't moved anything, the plotter can cut it again. This applies, for example, to vinyl. If your blade is already getting dull and you see that you might have trouble weeding, that is, removing the excess material you don't want and keeping only the vinyl you want to transfer onto a shirt or some other item, and it didn't cut through, you can just press it again. It will go over it again and cut it one more time. But it's important that you don't move it. We're satisfied, so we can press this. And that means it's finished its job, and now it's our turn. If you look at the computer program, we're already at the end of the whole process. Here, press done and it will take you back to the workspace where you worked with those first pieces we made. Take a look at how far we've come. And now we have the final result. We have a product that we created from a certain shape, a text, and a picture. And here is the result. And in several different versions right away. This is what we created together on the virtual computer workspace. This is the result. Now you could, for example, glue it together like this. And if you were making a board game or some kind of battle game for kids, or if you were a teacher at school, whatever you might need it for, you have this beautiful double-sided token that's sturdy. You can use it for anything. If it were printed on some material with an adhesive backing, then right now you'd have a sticker you could stick anywhere. The important thing is that you use the software in the plotter and turn something that was just a virtual image on your computer screen into a real, physical object. Thanks to the plotter, computer, and printer. What's the difference between what I used to make and what I make now? This could be, for example, part of a wooden product that has a label or sticker like this on it. Or it can have a little hole and there can be text here, and it's a tag for some product that I make. Endless possibilities. Like I said, the only limit is your imagination. And now imagine that you have this kind of ability, that you're able to create any product, as long as you have enough things that wear out, that is, a supply of blades and various tools, and a stock of materials. Any request, at any time, that someone makes. You're ready because you have, as they say, the knife and the cheese. and you're able to create anything that someone might wish for. If you're not, as they say, a maker, a producer, a creator, and you'd like to become one in the future and be self-sufficient, maybe in the market, this is the first step you should take. Learn to create virtually on the computer and make a real, physical thing that you can use, sell, and so on. I think today's video was longer, and maybe after a while, you enjoyed my company again. I hope you did, and that it was inspiring for you, and that you understood the angle I wanted to take with this. That this, too, is a part of self-sufficiency. I see it as someone who has high standards for aesthetics, who wants things to be nicely and professionally made. And I don't want to just sit at the computer searching to see if maybe someone, somewhere, has already made a token like this or something I could use to make it. I'll just go and make exactly what I want myself. At home, precisely, perfectly, and in this case, only for the cost of the material. And it will serve me well, and I'll always be able to repeat this process whenever I need to. In the future, I also plan to focus on 2 more areas of this kind of crafting. I'll be making videos both with the Cricut and with other machines as well. These days, it's essential to know how to do this, and as a prepper, I think it's really important to be able to create things like this for yourself, because you never know when you might need it. Food labels. So you have perfect inventory records of everything you have, so that the people in your group have their items labeled, know when to use them, and have clear instructions posted wherever you'll be hiding out, at every spot where they need them. And you don't want to be making things like this at some company where someone else will know what text you put in and why you did it. You want to make this yourself, quietly and privately at home, so that it's indestructible, so it won't, for example, dissolve in water, and so that only you and those in the know will understand what it's for. And for that, you'll also need other devices, which we'll talk about here in the future. This is another level of your self-sufficiency. I hope you enjoyed the video, that it inspired you, that you're looking forward to the next one, and I wish you a nice day.